All right, so today we're diving into a story that's equal parts terrifying and inspiring, I guess you could say.
Definitely a story that grabs you right from the start and doesn't let go.
Exactly. And that's Aloha Airlines Flight 243.
Oh, a classic case study in aviation, right?
It really is. And you know what gets me? It all started out like such a normal day.
Yeah, I mean, just a regular flight.
April 28th, 1988.
Passengers heading from Hilo to Honolulu, a quick little island hop.
Beautiful Hawaiian day. Imagine that.
Probably thinking about beaches and shave ice, not about,
Not about the plane falling apart around them,
Yeah.
exactly.
But before we get to the incident itself, I think it's important to understand the context here.
Absolutely what was going on with this particular plane.
So we're talking about a Boeing 737.
Okay, a workhorse of the skies.
Exactly. But this one was almost 2 decades old at this point.
19 years, to be exact.
And it had seen a lot of action, especially those short, frequent flights between the islands.
Right, those inter-island hops, they put a lot of stress on a plane's airframe, don't they?
It's the constant cycle of pressurization and depressurization, like bending a paperclip back and forth
Which
eventually.
eventually it's going to give.
Exactly.
And in this case, there was a tiny crack in the fuselage.
Which, on a plane that's already made, what, 8 round trips that day?
Yeah, I mean, it might not have seemed like a five-alarm fire at the time.
No, but that's the insidious thing about metal fatigue.
It's not always obvious until it's way too late.
Exactly. And in this case, well, things went from 0 to 60 pretty quickly.
So our passengers are cruising at 24,000 feet, probably daydreaming about Métis on the beach.
When suddenly, boom!
A significant portion of the cabin roof just tears off.
Yeah, not your average in-flight turbulence.
Not at all.
This is explosive decompression, and it's every bit as terrifying as it sounds.
What exactly happens during an explosive decompression?
Well, imagine the cabin is like a balloon, and suddenly someone pops it.
The air rushes out.
Exactly, but on a much larger and more violent scale.
And at 24,000 feet, that air is rushing out into a very thin atmosphere.
Which means a sudden, drastic drop in pressure and temperature.
We're talking about temperatures plummeting to, what, minus 45 degrees Celsius?
Yeah, and winds whipping through the cabin at over 500 kilometers an hour.
So not only are you dealing with the terror of the roof disappearing, but now you've got hurricane-force winds.
Freezing temperatures, oxygen levels dropping rapidly.
Chaos. Absolute chaos.
And to make matters worse, the oxygen masks, those things that should drop down automatically,
Yeah, those are pretty vital in this situation.
well, they were rendered basically useless.
What do you mean?
The oxygen lines, they were severed in the decompression.
So passengers are gasping for air in this freezing, wind-whipped.
It's a nightmare scenario, really.
It's just unimaginable. And amidst all of this, we have flight attendant Michelle Honda.
A true hero of this story, no doubt.
She starts trying to contact the pilots, but the intercom is down,
So she starts moving through the cabin, doing the unthinkable.
asking if anyone at all, knows how to fly a plane.
Desperate times, desperate measures, right?
Absolutely. But it speaks volumes about the kind of instincts that kick in during these moments of crisis.
She knew they needed a miracle, and she wasn't giving up.
An incredible testament to the human spirit. So while Michelle Honda is desperately searching for a miracle worker in that chaotic cabin,
Up in the cockpit, the pilots, Captain Stornsheim and First Officer Tompkins,
they're dealing with their own horrifying situation.
they're facing that same decompression, same force.
A chunk of the cockpit roof gone.
They're literally looking at the sky
Trying to control a plane that's, it's falling apart.
rapidly, and they've got no way to communicate with the cabin. The intercom's down.
Can you even imagine? Try to process all of that.
Adrenaline just takes over at that point. Instincts, training.
So what were their first moves?
Oxygen masks on. Thankfully, those were still functional.
That'd be a good feeling, right? Even amidst all of that.
Absolutely. And then assessing the damage, which was extensive.
No kidding. And all the while, they're thinking about everyone behind them, right?
Absolutely. But they have no way of knowing what's going on back there.
It's got to be a terrifying thought.
So they start an emergency descent, trying to get to an altitude where at least breathing is possible.
This wasn't just a slow descent, though, right?
No, this was a controlled plunge, dropping over 4,000 feet per minute.
While trying to keep the plane from, what, completely disintegrating.
Essentially, yeah, they're buying time, hoping against hope.
And then, as if things couldn't get any worse.
Remember that damaged nose section?
Oh, no.
It's partially detached.
You're kidding?
The cockpit was basically hanging on by the floorboards at this point.
I can't even.
But they're fighting. They're not giving up.
So what do they do? Was there anything they could do?
First Officer Tompkins, she gets on the radio with air traffic control,
So they're able to get a message out?
declaring an emergency, requesting clearance to land at Kahului Airport on Maui.
Closer than Honolulu, at least, right?
Right, but now there's another problem, a big one.
Don't tell me, let me guess. More bad weather.
Worse, they have to navigate around Halakala,
What, that massive volcano?
the highest peak on Maui, 10,000 feet of mountain standing between them and the runway.
Seriously, of course they did.
But Captain Schornsheim, incredible pilot, somehow threads the needle.
Through a gap in the mountain range.
With intense winds, a plane that's barely holding together, it's unbelievable.
It really is. What a story. So while all this is going on, what's happening with the passengers?
The plane has descended enough that some passengers are regaining consciousness.
Oh, wow.
Imagine waking up on a plane with a gaping hole in the side, wind screaming past you.
A mountain whizzing by outside the window.
Relief at being able to breathe again, mixed with pure terror.
But they were alive, and against all odds, getting closer to the ground.
But the question was, could they land safely?
I mean, they're running out of altitude here. They have to land soon.
They know it. Emergency crews on the ground, they know it.
Everyone's bracing for a rough landing at best.
And then they get another curveball.
Oh, no, what now?
The nose gear?
The front wheel.
Yeah, I wouldn't deploy.
Are you serious? They're going to have to land this thing without a front wheel.
A belly landing, incredibly risky even with a perfectly intact plane.
But with all the damage this plane has sustained.
Could have been catastrophic, the impact alone.
So what were their options at that point?
Not many. Time was running out, altitude, miracles, everything.
It's like something out of a movie, just one thing after another.
And then just when it seems like all hope is lost.
What? Tell me there's a glimmer of good news here.
Someone spots it, the nose gear, it's down.
It was down the whole time.
It had deployed, but the indicator light in the cockpit, it was malfunctioning because of the damage.
Talk about a close call. Can you imagine the relief in that cockpit?
And in the cabin, for those who knew what was going on.
A collective sigh of relief across the entire island, probably.
But because this flight just couldn't catch a break.
Here we go again.
As they're preparing to touch down, the left engine, the one that's been struggling this whole time,
It gives out.
gives out.
Of course it does.
But Captain Schornsheim, he keeps his cool, somehow,
Uses the landing engine, the thrust reversers,
and lands that plane.
at 1:58 p.m.,
Uh-huh.
less than an hour after that terrifying decompression.
Aloha Airlines Flight 243 comes to a stop on the runway at Kahului Airport.
I bet that was a moment. Relief, disbelief, the whole 9 yards.
Absolute chaos. People were injured, some seriously, from the decompression, the debris, the cold.
And tragically, flight attendant C.B. Lansing, she was never found.
A stark reminder that even in these stories of survival, there are losses.
Losses that remind us just how precious life is.
But 94 people survived against all odds.
So what did the investigation reveal? What caused this near catastrophe?
The National Transportation Safety Board, they really dug deep. The
God.
main culprit, metal fatigue, specifically corrosion.
We talked about the stress those short flights put on the plane.
Each flight cycle, it's like stretching a rubber band. Do it enough times, it snaps.
And that corrosive environment in Hawaii, the salt air, the humidity.
It all adds up, weakens the structure over time.
And we know Boeing had actually issued bulletins about this type of aircraft years before.
They had advised airlines to use new inspection techniques like eddy current testing.
Which is much more effective than just visual inspections, right?
Exactly. It can detect those tiny cracks much earlier.
So why didn't Aloha Airlines implement it?
Well, they were facing financial pressures. They'd been deferring maintenance, inspections.
To keep the planes flying, keep the money coming in.
It's a sad reality, but it happens. And in this case, it had devastating consequences.
A reminder that safety should always come first. Always.
Absolutely. And thankfully, this incident led to major changes in aviation safety.
Of what?
The Aging Aircraft Safety Program, for one.
What does that do?
It mandates stricter inspections for older planes,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to metal fatigue.
So they're not just looking at flight hours anymore.
Right. They're considering the cumulative stress of those short flights, the environment.
And requiring more rigorous inspections, using that eddy current technology. It's incredible how one event, as terrifying as it was, could lead to so much progress.
A real turning point for aviation safety, you could say.
Absolutely. And it makes you think, the next time we're on a plane, settling into our seats.
It's worth remembering Flight 243, the heroes in the cockpit, the cabin crew, the passengers.
And the lasting impact this event had on making air travel safer for everyone.
It's a story we can all learn from, that's for sure.
Absolutely. A story of resilience, the importance of safety, and the power of human ingenuity in the face of disaster. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.